Welcome to Dark Minds, Stories of Serial Killers. I'm Victoria, and together we explore the chilling, disturbing stories of history's most notorious killers. Today we dive into the life of Ted Bundy, a man whose name has become synonymous with terror, charm, and cruelty. Join us as we uncover the twisted path of one of the most infamous serial killers in history, a man who used his charm to hide a darkness few could imagine. At what point does a life become a well of darkness and manipulation? In the case of Ted Bundy, the man who would come to be known as the charismatic killer, this line was crossed, taking with it the lives of dozens of young women. Today, we journey through the shadowed halls of a twisted and seductive mind, a man who gained his victims' trust only to rip it away in acts of brutality beyond comprehension. Get ready to meet the man who, beneath a mask of charm and elegance, hid one of the darkest faces in the history of serial killers. It was the 1970s in the United States, a time of cultural change and a society searching for openness and freedom. Amid this vibrant era emerged a predator who used every advantage to manipulate, disguise himself, and approach young women who never imagined the danger lurking around them. He was not the monster of nightmares, but rather an attractive, educated, and above all, dangerous man. Ted Bundy knew how to present himself, and with his above-average intelligence, he could infiltrate the lives of his victims with chilling ease. Where others saw limits, Bundy saw opportunity, a chance to showcase his coldness and dominance over those unfortunate enough to cross his path. In each of these stories that began with a friendly smile, you can feel the weight of a society unprepared to face such an enemy. With a welcoming face, Bundy approached his victims in public places, pretending to be injured or needing help. And in that moment, when empathy would naturally arise, he revealed his true face. The impact of his crimes would devastate families and communities, turning his name into a macabre legend and showing the world that evil can hide behind the most unlikely faces. Ted Bundy was not only exceptionally intelligent. His childhood, marked by family secrets and a lack of emotional stability, left deep marks of narcissism and coldness that would grow over time. Raised to believe his mother was his sister, he lived surrounded by lies and mysteries from his earliest years. These influences molded a personality skilled in manipulation, but hiding an intense anger and contempt for life and human feelings. He was not just a predator, he was a man who saw people as tools, objects to be used and discarded as he pleased. The signs of an antisocial personality disorder were evident in every action, in every empty look he cast. Bundy was a master of deception, pretending to feel emotions he never had. Deep down, he felt no remorse or guilt, only an unending hunger for control and a desire to prove he could defy the limits of morality and decency. Ted Bundy's psychology is a disturbing study, but it reveals how a lack of empathy and mastery of manipulation became the deadliest weapons in his horror-filled path. But do we know all the faces of Ted Bundy? What else lurks behind the mask of this killer who marked a generation? Get ready to dive even deeper into darkness and terror as we explore the modus operandi and chilling choices behind his victims. Ted Bundy's terror was not only in the brutal acts he committed, but also in the way he selected and approached his victims. Young women, mostly students, attractive with long middle-parted hair, a chilling and deliberate pattern, perhaps tied to a deep personal trauma. He approached them in public places, libraries, parks, university parking lots, and the most terrifying part, he knew how to evoke empathy. Bundy would feign injury, with his arm or leg in a cast, asking for help with books or getting into his car. When these young women, unaware of the lurking danger, approached him, he would pull them into his car. In that moment, escape was no longer an option. They were taken to remote areas, where he would reveal his true nature, a merciless killer, completely in control of his victims. With each attack, Bundy experienced a growing intensity of dominance. He didn't just end their lives but seemed to draw on the fear and despair of each victim, an emotional vampire feeding on pain and anguish. His victims were not mere numbers or targets, They were part of a twisted and calculated game, where he felt he held absolute control over lives extinguished by his hands. And even after death, the horror continued, as Bundy would return to the crime scenes to commit acts of necrophilia, a grim signature of his sadism, and a disturbing reminder of his obsession with power. Between 1974 and 1978, Ted Bundy left a trail of horror and destruction across multiple U.S. states. His first known victims disappeared without a trace, but soon the pattern of murders began raising suspicions. As his thirst for violence increased, Bundy grew bolder, even attacking in broad daylight, as he did at Washington's popular Lake Sammamish. On that fateful day, he approached 2 young women within hours, introducing himself as Ted, and using the same ploy of asking for help. Their simultaneous disappearances shocked the community, and authorities realized they were dealing with something far more sinister than isolated cases. Bundy was a shadow moving in silence, shifting between states when the pressure mounted, all while leaving a trail of bodies and shattered families. Police departments from Washington to Utah to Florida began to recognize the patterns and connect the clues. Each investigation became more intense, but he always seemed one step ahead. His boldness reached its peak in 1978, with the violent invasion of the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In a single night, he attacked 4 young women, brutally killing 2 in a way that shocked even the most seasoned investigators. Bundy wasn't just a killer, he was a relentless predator who struck with fury and left a path of destruction. For authorities, capturing Ted Bundy would become one of the greatest challenges of the era. In 1975, he was finally detained in Utah for reckless driving, but police soon realized he might be the man wanted for multiple murders. Even behind bars, Bundy continued to manipulate and charm. He studied law and acted as his own defense attorney in court, using his charm to confuse and control the legal process. During his trial, his gaze seemed to challenge his accusers, as if he were always in control, even inside a courtroom. But the most surprising twist was yet to come. In 1977, Bundy escaped from custody, jumping from a second-story courthouse window, and roamed free for days before being recaptured. But his audacity didn't stop there. Months later, he escaped again, this time through a hole he'd created in his cell ceiling, disappearing into the night. He fled to Florida, where he would go on to kill again before being apprehended once more. Each escape, each legal manipulation, and each mind game he played were part of his theater of control and manipulation. It was as if he was determined to challenge all authority, as if he wanted to prove he was beyond the reach of punishment. After a nationwide manhunt, Ted Bundy was finally captured and brought to trial. During the process, he again represented himself, turning the courtroom into his personal stage. In his statements, he displayed a disturbing confidence, even with overwhelming evidence against him. In 1979, he was sentenced to death in Florida. Bundy would spend nearly a decade on death row, where his manipulative personality continued to draw attention, even from those who corresponded with him and sympathized with the killer. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy met his end in the electric chair. He died without ever showing true remorse, never admitting the full extent of his crimes. To the end, he used manipulation and charm, captivating and horrifying all who followed his story. News of his execution was met with relief and even celebration from many who had been impacted by his cruelty. Ted Bundy may have been executed, but his shadow remains alive in the collective memory, as a reminder that evil sometimes wears the mask of charm and attraction. Ted Bundy's case forever changed the way we see serial killers. He wasn't an ordinary monster, but a man who displayed control, intelligence, and emotional manipulation, characteristics that made his cruelty all the more terrifying. For the families of his victims, there was no complete consolation, as the trail of pain he left can never be erased. Ted Bundy's name is remembered as one of the most horrifying examples of what can happen when empathy is absent and the hunger for power dominates. How many others are hidden in plain sight, using their charm to gain our trust? Ted Bundy's story makes us question the nature of evil and how easily we can be deceived by a friendly face. Follow our channel, subscribe, and join us as we delve into the dark mysteries that lurk behind the most seemingly normal lives. After all, can we truly know the people we think we trust?